Hi, I'm Kirsten. I'm the case manager at the Micah Day Center, and I meet with the guest, and one of the main needs that they have is getting an ID. There may be many reasons why they don't have an ID. They could have come from out of state and have lost their ID, or it's been stolen. We've had people who have taken the Greyhound bus here, and before they even got off the bus, their ID in their wallet or something, their bag was stolen. So if that's the case, then it's a little bit more of a process to get that ID. Some people could have went to prison, and unfortunately they don't follow that individual when they're released. They have to get a new ID, and again, if they haven't had a Mississippi ID before, it can be a process also. So what I normally do is start with the easiest thing. So to be able to get an ID in Mississippi, you have to have your birth certificate and social security card, and you would also need a two proofs of residency, which we do provide a notarized letter that will take place of that, so we don't worry about that. What we worry about is getting those two things. So the social security card is free, and all they need to do is go down to the Social Security office or fill out an application. And for identification, if they've been to a hospital, say the local hospital like Merit Health, then they can get a face sheet, and that face sheet is just kind of like the main sheet that identifies that individual. It includes their social security number, their name, and some other pertinent information. That will take place of identification. So they can get that social security card, and they can have it mailed to the address here at Back Bay Mission. So once we've taken care of that, then we look at the birth certificate. So depending on what state they're in, every state is different. They almost all require identification, except California, actually, one of the biggest states, and what they just need is a notarized form, which we luckily have a couple of notaries on our staff. So we're able to do that one, but in other states they have to have identification. If they don't have identification, because that's what we're trying to do, we look at secondary documents. So this is a secondary list of several things that they can have that will take place of that identification, and sometimes those can include like voter registration card. It can also include a prison ID, a military, like a DD 214, a payroll, a pay stub, many different things. So if they have two of those, they can hopefully get that birth certificate. And the one thing that we concentrate on the most is a social security card or correspondence from the Social Security office, or if they get food stamps. Those are usually two secondary documents that we can actually work on getting. It does take time, but it is doable. I've only been stumped 2 times, and I will go and go and go until I figure out how to get it, but most of the time we can do it. It does take time, and unfortunately they have to be very patient. So once they get the birth certificate, and then they get their social security card, and we give them the notarized letter, they can go to the DMV. Now, they may need the fee to pay for that. An identification in Mississippi is $17. And we will help with that if they've applied for employment or housing and they have to show proof of either one. Once they do that, we can either go online and order the ID, but most of the time, if it's a first timer, they have to actually go to the DMV and they have to get the transportation there. We're not able to do that. And that in itself can sometimes be a roadblock for some to get there because the bus does not run there. So even though it's kind of like an obstacle course, you have to keep making your way. You might hit some barriers, but you kind of knock through them and you keep going. But it's a good thing to see when someone's been working on it for quite a while and they actually get the mail and they get their birth certificate, or they go down to the DMV and get the ID. Sometimes I'm more excited than they are I always ask them if I can take copies of it, so I actually have that on file for them just in case that one is lost or stolen. So unfortunately that does happen when they're out on the streets, they're unsheltered. You have the homeless stealing from the homeless, and those items are mostly identification, IDs, driver's license, birth certificates, social security cards. Unfortunately, it's just something that we see on a regular basis. So unfortunately, sometimes we can only help with the fee one time, at least for that year, and then it's we kind of just see what the situation is, and then we kind of go from there. So yeah, it's sometimes it can be a daunting task, but it can be done. So Open Doors Homeless Coalition, through them we got a machine that actually does homeless IDs. So that is something that has their picture. They can put their social on it if they wish. I know some people are kind of leery about having their social security card on things, but they can do a date of birth. It's really what they want to put on it. And that homeless ID actually doesn't take place of a government issued ID, and actually can't help with getting birth certificates or social security cards, unfortunately, but it can help, say if they applied for SNAP, and SNAP is the food stamps, and if they're new to the state and just applying for the first time, they require identification. Now we can use that, and I do a letter that verifies who they are. Those two things together can help them get food stamps, but it does not take place of a government issued ID, which means they can't use it for employment purposes.
But it's better than nothing.
But it is better than nothing, and a lot of times, even I talked with a gentleman today, and he did have an ID, and he actually had a driver's license, which most states don't allow that. You have one or the other. But he asked about getting the homeless ID, and I said, well, you can still do it even though you have your identification and it's valid. If the cops stop you, or you may need to show that you're working with a case manager, then that will allow that person to see that you are receiving services here. And if they need to try to contact you, that the possibility of you might be here in the day center.
And I've even heard from some of the guests that even some of the local pawn shops and casinos and whatnot will at least accept that versus nothing, which...
Yeah, and that's... The homeless ID, some places may take it, and it's pick and choose. So one place may take it and another place will say no. But it does help with, like, if the pawn shops or at the casinos, if they're needing to know who they are, because the casinos are really, I think, hyper vigilant of the homeless coming in, and so they're always asking for identification. So if they don't have a state ID, then that takes place of that. The homeless ID, I had a thought and it went away, but what's the other thing? Unfortunately, if they do say they're getting disability benefits and they need to open a checking account, most banks won't take them. So it's really just finding out what they accept. But with employment and banks, it has to be a government issued ID. So the duration, the time to get these documents is some vary. Of course, the birth certificate varies state to state. In Mississippi, it can take maybe 2 to 4 weeks to get the birth certificate back, and that's once they receive it. The Social Security card takes 7 to 10 business days by the day that they receive it. And when they have those two documents and they go get the ID, that can take a day. It's just them getting to the DMV. So just depending on the state, depending on if they follow through with getting what they need to get the Social Security card or the birth certificate, I would say some can take 2 to 3 months to be able to get everything to go get the ID. In California, it takes a little bit longer, and the reason why I keep bringing up California is because I've done a couple already, so it does take some time. So so I would guess for most states 2 to 4 months to actually get this process going. So it can be frustrating for some when they're really needing a job and needing some type of income, and that income is what they need to actually start looking for housing, and other things that they need to do to be self-sustainable. It depends on the individual and them following through and what they're experiencing out there. There's a lot more going on that we don't know about. So, whether it's drug use, it's mental health issues, relationship issues, just whatever, those things can keep someone from getting what they need to get. So I had a gentleman that came in, he was in prison for 20 years, and he didn't have anything when he got here, and he was from another state. And so we had to start from scratch. And he also had some anger issues. So when we started off, he got very, it was just explaining the process to him. He just got really, agitated very quickly. Once I got to know him, I didn't take it personally, and most of the time I don't, because there's a whole world that goes out there that I don't know about. So in working with them, I found a way to communicate with them and made sure I explained it, did it slowly so he got it, and just kept reassuring him that we would get this done. And that took a couple of years. So that was an extreme case. Some it could take just a couple of months. So again, it just depends on that individual, what they're capable of doing, and the other factors that come into play. Gosh, as far as, assistance from the community, it's, we always appreciate the monetary donations that we get. We greatly appreciate those. And those actually allow us to be able to purchase the IDs and the birth certificates. And that's something that we're always needing. We know that other agencies are advocating for the bus to run to the DMV to be on a route, and that would be great too. But unfortunately, that's something that our local agencies and politicians have to get involved for. So just, if you know of any politician that you can write to and advocate that the services that are available for the unsheltered, say food stamps, so go into DHS. DHS is not on the bus route. The DMV is not on the bus route. The WIN Job Center is not on the bus route. So we need those to be on a bus route. So advocating is another thing. That's really all I can think about, because really it's just, the bigger powers than we are.
Yes.
Unfortunately, and that was one of the things that we were trying to do, was to provide transportation to the DMV, because we didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel for that. So we were hoping to do that at some point, and maybe we'll be able to do that. But until then, they have to find a friend, a relative. If they have income, schedule an Uber or a taxi, which is expensive. So those are other, things that come up. There's always some type of barrier that comes up, but there's always options. But it just it depends on the individual. So I was working with a gentleman who was trying to get a birth certificate, and he didn't have any type of identification from the first list, so we had to go to the secondary list, and unfortunately he did not have any of those. So we were not able to get his birth certificate, and people will get frustrated and then they'll just leave, and then I don't see them again. But I did actually forget about something. So the way that we can actually go around getting them a birth certificate, for them to order their birth certificate, is if their parents are, if they still have communication with their parents, they can actually order the birth certificate for them if they have an ID, and then we can ask them to mail it to here once they receive it. So that's another way to get around that. But if they don't have any family, then that again is where it stops. So with that gentleman, we were stopped and he wasn't able to get an ID. Now, if he comes from another state and he had an ID and it was valid and we can change the address online, we will be able to get the ID from another state, which will then allow him to get his birth certificate to start the process for getting an ID in Mississippi. So you don't have to get a Mississippi ID right away, which I think some people they believe that, and it's not true. We have people here who even have license plates from another state. They just never change them. So it is doable. Jobs around here will take out of state IDs, so there's no rush, but that also we can get around. So there's other ways of doing things. So it's just talking it through and getting more information and then having an aha moment and then being able to go through and get what they need. So yeah, sometimes I feel like it's like a maze. You kind of have to make your way, and then once you get it, you're like, okay, so this is going to lead me out now. So yeah, it's an interesting process, and it's not as easy as it seems. We do have people that come here thinking we are the DMV and we're not the DMV, and then when I explain to them, they kind of are like, well, that, what? And so yeah, I'm like, no, we help get the IDs, but we're not the DMV. We do provide homeless IDs, but they don't take place of a government issued ID. So it's just letting them know the correct information, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So it's every day I think I talk to somebody about an ID, birth certificate, or social security card, but that's okay. Because once you see them being able to get whatever it is they need and they get that job or they get their housing, it's totally worth it.